That same day she got the news, all right, that's going away. Income just went to zero. Bring the kids in. Here's the deal. This is where we're at. Again, then that was the year with no income.
Today on Time We Discuss, I have Bill with me from Story Builders. Bill, thank you for joining me.
Great to be with you. We're looking forward to talking about how to create stories and how to find your strengths and purpose and talents and put it all together. So it's going to be fun.
It is going to be awesome. I love what you're doing. And I understand your story is pretty extensive. I mean, from a professional standpoint, I mean, you started in retail. You were a pastor at one point. You created your own school. You're a writer. So let's go way back. Let's talk about how you found your career. So let's start there. How would you say, what was the first career you had that really kind
Um,
of led you down this long path?
my very first job was as a paper boy. I mean, back in the day, for crying out loud. And it was kind of ironic, though. I was 10 years old when I got my paper route. But it's ironic that my first job was with words, right? Even though I didn't realize it, I was delivering words to people really physically. And of course, I would read each one of them voraciously every day and suck it up. And I just thought that was normal. I just thought that everybody loves to read and absorb words and talk about words and all. And it took me a couple of decades actually before I realized not everybody's wired that way. And so what I was really loving to do as a young man, as a teenager, was part of my unique talents and strengths. And so as a teen, young adult, I read all the time. I wrote all the time. I loved doing that, but I never really thought of it as a career path. I didn't have a way of thinking I could make money with this, mostly because nobody else in my family or my circle was doing that, right? So I wasn't exposed to anything like that. Although it did then shape where I went with my college education. I chose to just follow those passions, and I ended up double majoring in English and history, right? Writing and the stories to write about, right? And so even though I didn't have clarity totally, I just kept kind of focusing it forward. But that's kind of where it all began. From a young age, I knew I was supposed to write. I just didn't know what to do with it.
Leaving college, you were a double major. How did that transition into you becoming a pastor? 'Cause I believe that was next on your list, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and some of these things overlap, because as a young man, I had been in retail, small business retail for 10 years with a mom and pop store and had grown with them and so forth. But I met a wonderful woman who I wanted to marry. And her dad wisely said, "Hey, you need to get a better paying job if you're going to do this, right?" And benefits and all that stuff. And so that kind of pushed me. I actually applied to a local publishing company, but didn't even get an interview. I applied to a retail company, Target at the time, as one of their managers and got it immediately. Was hired the next day. I'm like, well, all right, here we go. Let's do this. I know that. So I did that for 2 years, even while I was beginning to pastor in a small church where I was. And so that's kind of overlapped. After 2 years, though, I left retail. I finally concluded this is not for me. I don't enjoy it. It's not, it drains me. It doesn't empower me. So walked away from that into the unknown, was just pastoring, and then stepped into helping to start this new school at the same time. So, and even with the school, though, I was getting closer. Like pastoring, I'm working with words and messages and those kind of things. And school, I'm getting now into, all right, let me help teach other people how to write and how to grow and how to tell stories and build curriculum and all that kind of stuff. So, again, I wish I could say it was intentional, but it was more intuitive. That I didn't have a lot of guidance to point me in that direction, but just kind of gradually kept falling forward into that direction.
Forgive me, I'm not very well versed in different religious organizations.
Sure.
Are you still a pastor presently, or is that a chapter that's been left behind?
Yeah, mostly left that behind. I always have for lack of better words, I've been told I have a shepherding heart, if that makes sense.
It
Like I'm
does.
always looking to help people and guide them and direct them in that sense. And so I've always viewed it that way. And even when I started the school, I kind of had a similar type of role. Again, it was a Christian school. We had over 100 different churches represented there with the kids. So it was a diverse group of people who shared a core faith. And I was kind of leading that, right? So it was still there was part of that going on. But yeah, no, I'm not, don't do any of that actively now, other than more that just that shepherding. I was looking to help people and how can I help them move forward in that way.
What's a typical day like for someone that is a pastor? Because
Mm.
when I was growing up, I was part of an organized religion, and we had our weekend ceremonies. But you only see as a child, you only see that
Yeah.
part of the pastor's life. So
Right.
what is it like
Yeah.
on a typical day as a pastor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on the type of pastor and the role
Sure.
that they have. If someone's like a primary pastor, the one who teaches or preaches or those kind of things, a lot of their time should be invested preparing for that time. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of pressures. There always have been, but they've increased in recent decades, at least in the US, to for the pastor to become this kind of CEO figure. And so they have to become a really good leader and run everything and grow the church and they feel the pressure to put numbers up, right? To get more people in and those kind of things, rather than focusing more on the impact that they're actually having with the people who are there and in their community. So I think that has been a little bit counterproductive in many ways. But so a lot of that, it's about you really need to know your theology, you need to have gone through a lot of that education for good reason, but also not lose sight of it's a lot of caring, a lot of connecting with people, a lot of leading the other leaders in the church to do the same, right? So not thinking that it's all on you to do, but empowering other people to do that. And the word that comes to my mind is servant.
This could be different depending on the organization, but how important is it to have like a bachelor's degree in theology if you want
Sure.
to go down that road? Is that important? Is that not important?
Oh, I believe it is critically important to be well versed. I think one of the problems that so many churches have today is their leaders just are not well versed in what they believe. So yeah, I mean, I got about halfway through my master's of divinity when I was going through that season, and then stopped before I got to New Testament Greek and Hebrew, because I'm like, I really don't want to do that. um, but yeah, I mean, you got to. I mean, that's what that path is about. And if you aren't willing to do the work and understand that, there may be other related things you can go into that aren't that primary role. There's a whole host of other things you can do to help other people grow and do that and serve. And there's just a lot of options. But if you're going to be in that kind of pastoral role, then absolutely you gotta pursue that. Usually, I would suggest pursuing a master's of divinity in terms of education, but then that's as a positional title or credential. But then you got to keep growing, right? You can't just sit on that. You have to keep growing and learning. So
Let's talk about the next chapter. After that, you created a school. You helped create a school. Was that part of being a pastor? I got the impression it was.
no, it
No.
wasn't connected at all, actually. It was more connected to an opportunity arose to be part of a team that was founding the school. And it kind of resonated. It was, it's what Stephen Pressfield calls a shadow calling. And I think that happens many times where we find things that it's kind of sort of close to what we think we're supposed to do. It's not really, but it's close enough. And so then we get in there, we settle. Now, the thing was, I mean, I was doing by all accounts, good work, right? Working with kids and families and helping them grow and all this. And I was there for a dozen years. And the school grew. We started out at like 120 students. We were over 400 students by the time I left. It was a really good school. Um, and I did a lot of things I loved, right? I taught people how to write. I taught history. I taught English. I developed curriculum, all that, learned a whole lot about leadership. Um, but at the end of the day, I had to conclude that going back to my childhood, if I was really born to write, I wasn't writing. And so what do I do with that? Right. And ultimately, what I concluded was that someone else could run this school as good as or better than I could if their heart was in it and mine was increasingly not. But no one else could write for me, right? No one else could do that. And so, that's when I chose, hey, I need to step away and step into this new direction.
So sometimes when people are looking to go down a similar road, and I'm going to equate this to being like an entrepreneur almost. You have that moment of, you continue to work on your project while you're still working full time. Did you begin writing while you were still at the school and try to start to make that work, or what was that process like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have six kids. And so when we were going through that season, they were all relatively young-ish, right? So they were There was a couple years that I tried to do both, right? And so they were anywhere from 2 years old to 10, like in that age range. And I had gone back to school. I'd got my master's, my MBA, while I was running the school at nights and weekends and so forth. Um, and so I'd reached a point though where I was like, hey, I really need to write. And so I'd get up at 5 a.m. and I'd write in the morning. Then I'd go run the school and I'd come home at night, try to get some family time, do a little bit more writing, go to bed, get up at 5 a.m. Right. And that was my life for the better part of a year until I just realized, all right, this isn't sustainable. I'm not doing either one of these things well, right? And so that was when I had to decide to let go of that. But yeah, I tried to do both for a while. And I don't really recommend the path that I took, which was, hey, I'm going to step away and go in this new direction without a lot of clarity of what that meant. I recommend you do get more clarity, but it didn't resonate with me as authentic.
It's interesting. Recently I was editing a video. It doesn't go live for another few weeks. It was about a professional declutterer. Her name was Julie, and we were talking about her transition from full-time
Yeah.
working to starting her own business, and she was saying how much she had planned out everything. And when July 1st came, she stopped her job, she started her business. She didn't have any clients, but she was like ready to hit the ground running. So it's
Right.
kind of like the opposite of what you said. She was
Yeah.
planned. She had it all set and ready to go. And
Yeah.
you just said, you'd recommend not doing what you did, like have a little more clarity. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of interesting having the
Yeah.
two juxtaposed with each other.
Yeah. It was an adventure going a year, almost a year with no income at all and 6 kids, right? And coming out of a nonprofit ministry oriented, like we weren't making a lot of money anyways, right? And so it was literally month to month, week to week. Let's see how this plays out, kind of thing. And a lot of people helped us, which we're so grateful for. Although I have to say, I never worked harder than that year. Like I was working nonstop, learning, growing, basically investing in my education through that process, and it paid off in the years after that.
So let's talk about you as a writer. Let's talk about the first book specifically. From the time it was written until published,
Right.
what happened there? Did you go like a self-published route? Did you use a traditional publisher? How
Mhm.
did that initial book pan out?
Yeah, the initial book was my book, right? So a lot of what I do now is write with other people in collaborative ways. But the initial book was my book, and it was inspired by this journey that I had taken over the several years leading up to it. And it was called A Story Worth Telling, Your Field Guide to Living an Authentic Life. And it was very much a faith book, a Christian book about that journey. And so we went a traditional publisher, Abingdon Press at the time, had published it, and that whole writing process was helpful for me to really process and understand and frame it in such a way that it could be helpful for other people. And in doing that, though, I realized I really like doing this and I'm really good at it. So, that's interesting. And then I began to connect with other people who are like, yeah, I want to do a book. I wish I had somebody to help me. And I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing on book. Let me help you. I just did that. And then, that began to gain momentum over a few years. But it was a traditionally published book at the time. Since then, I've actually bought the rights back to that book. I'm reworking it all. I'm going to working on another book coming out in 2025 that is kind of next level thoughts about all that. But it was traditional.
Looking back at the various careers that you've had, what skills have really carried you forward into what you do now?
I've learned so much about the science and art of writing. Right. I was literally just looking up one of my professors from back in my college days. I had her for 3 classes, and she really loved language and loved to take words apart and go deep on them and understand them. And there was one time, it was in one of her courses, and it was a summer course, so I didn't really want to be there. And one of the midterm papers, I didn't give it 100%. I checked the box, I turned something in, and I'll never forget, she gave it back with a grade of C, and I never got C's. And these guys, she's like, no, not gonna. She gave it back with a C, and it simply said, "I expected more from you." And I was like, all right, you asked for it, right? So the, 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 final paper for that class, I gave it everything I had, turned it in, got it back. It was like A plus. This is the bill I know, right? It was funny. But she pushed me, right? She challenged me in that, not only taught me the writing skills. So I think that's the second thing is that you have to be able to challenge yourself to move forward and develop that discipline, right? When I left the school and gone a year with no income, no one was looking over my shoulder saying, "Are you working today?" Or you'd have to put in the work. You have to sit in the chair. You got to put your fingers on the keyboard. You got to do these things, right? And so that developing that discipline applies to everything. And then the third thing I think is mindset. Again, it's not a tactical skill, but if I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would be work on your mindset from an early age. Work on your mindset of having a, first of all, a positive mindset, a persevering mindset, a I can do this mindset, a learner's mindset, developing curiosity around everything. Well, why is it that way? And what if we did this? And all that kind of stuff. I think those are really the skills I would lean into. Yes, the technical skills, writing, all those things, of course. But the bigger ones that matter more, I think, are the ones that don't get all the attention. You have to understand the medium of writing. Writing is not video and it's not audio. It's words on a page. So it's a one-way conversation that's taking place in someone else's head, right? So you have to write in a way that the reader cannot misunderstand what you're saying, but you're also getting zero feedback from them. They're not nodding, they're not smiling, they're not you'd have no idea what they're doing. And so it does take a lot of getting really detailed. And I think that's where people struggle is they put the work into it and they think, all right, I can't do anymore. Or again, going back to that perseverance, I just don't want to do anymore. That's good enough. And then people read it and they struggle to connect with it, and it's kind of jumbled and they can't follow the flow. Good books take a lot of work to get done really well, and to get to that place where it feels like an easy read for a reader, it takes a lot of hard work by a writer and editor.
Is it safe to assume like that's kind of where Story Builders comes in, that you're there to kind of help people facilitate an area where they can kind of work with you and build a book? What's Story Builders
Sure,
like from that
sure.
perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's what we do. We tell stories that make the world a better place. And so what we do is we come alongside people to help them create compelling books. So anything and everything having to do with books, nonfiction at the moment, not fiction. From a writing standpoint, we can actually work with fiction books in some ways, but yeah, if someone says, "Hey, I have written a book, I want to bring it to life and bring it to the world," we can help with that. Someone says, "I want to write a book, but I'm not a writer," we can help with that. We can write for them, with them in their voice, or we can coach them through that process and again get it all the way up and out into the world, or help them find a traditional publisher and all that kind of stuff. Anything related to books, compelling books, but also engaging learning experiences. And this is where my education background comes in, right? Where we help people then take those ideas, their intellectual property, and figure out how do we monetize them and how do we increase the impact of those ideas through digital courses or trainings or workshops, any number of things that we can do to bring those to life. And we've had the privilege of like doing all of John Maxwell's trainings over the last many years, and Kevin Harrington at Shark Tank, and Lewis Howes, and anyway, a whole bunch of people. But it's all about that. It's about taking those ideas and increasing your impact, influence, and income as a result of the ideas that are in your head.
Bill, this is the part of the show where I like to sometimes throw a surprise question at the person I'm speaking with. It has absolutely nothing to do with what you do for a living or your career. So these questions, I tend to come up with maybe about a dozen or so, and I just randomly select, well, I don't randomly, but I select the next one based on who I'm talking to, just to go down the list.
Sure.
So this question is kind of fitting for you, ironically. So the question I have for you, every day we have to make a countless number of decisions. Some of them are easy, what should I have for breakfast? And others may require a little more thought. So looking back over the course of your life, what was the most difficult decision that you had to make, which had a positive outcome?
I would say it probably would be the decision to step away from leading a school where I had established an identity. right? Everybody in the community knew me as the guy that runs that school, right? And everybody in the school knew that. And I was, my parents had deep roots in the area, and my wife's parents had deep roots in the area, so we had a pretty clear identity at that point. But like I said, at the same point, it felt like that outward identity didn't fully align with my inward identity, right? There was this gap, and it created tension between them. And so I think definitely one of the most challenging decisions was to step away from that and into the unknown to do that. I initially thought we always played the best case scenarios in our head, right? Or worst case, but the best case scenarios. Initially thought, hey, I can stay on with the school, help them find a replacement, support them, and kind of ease out and ease into the next. And it didn't work out that way. Yeah, and I remember coming home the one day with my wife and our 6 kids. On the one day, I had a meeting and learned that, hey, this is your last day at the school. Let's make a clean break. All right, income there goes to zero. My wife comes home. She had a kind of a side job that she was working on with a family member. And that same day, she got the news. All right, that's going away. Income just went to zero. Bring the kids in. We all piled on the bed, like, hey guys, here's the deal. This is where we're at. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. This is what's happening. We actually pulled out the Bible, one of the Psalms, and read through it and prayed together and said, hey, this is the path we're on. Let's enjoy this journey, guys. And then again, that was the year with no income, right? So I think that was probably one of the hardest decisions to make, with seemingly so much in the balance, and yet the drive to be authentic in what I was pursuing.
That's a great story. And I love the part how you added about, everything with your wife and then the kids, and talking to your kids about that. That's all, a conversation like that is always hard to have with kids, because some kids they're gonna take it, they're gonna understand it, and other kids, they're gonna accept it, but also worry a lot. So as a parent, I can
Mm,
only
mm,
imagine, what that must have been like for you and your family, and
yeah.
everything that's going on in everyone's heads.
Yeah, yeah. Although it led to one of the best Christmas memories, because that Christmas we didn't have any money, and so we had very little. But we got the kids 2 gifts really for Christmas. They got their favorite cereal, whatever that was, Lucky Charms or whatever, big box of their favorite cereal, and a 12 pack of whatever soda was their favorite soda. And that we generally don't drink a lot of that, right? So that they were like, oh, it's amazing. They still talk about that to this day. They're now what, 23 to 17 range, and they still talk about that. That was such a fun Christmas. So whatever it looks like, you can still enjoy that process.
I was talking to people the other day about different things that happen in life, and the rough circumstances. And at the time, it's difficult. But then looking back, some of those, they make for really, really great stories and really great
Yeah,
memories.
yeah,
So that is something.
yeah.
Uh, Bill, one thing I do like to do, when I speak with someone, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in, their business. So I'd like to extend that courtesy to you. If there's something you would like to discuss, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, if someone is listening and they're like, hey, I want to write a book, or I thought about writing a book, or I know somebody who should write a book, I would say the easiest thing we could do is just offer a totally free strategy session with them. And they can schedule that anytime. They just go to mystorybuilders.com/story, mystorybuilders.com/story, and just book a time with one of our senior story strategists to talk through their idea. We love talking stories. There's no pressure or anything like that. Let's just hear what you have going on, and someone wants to do that, we can find out if we're a fit. If not, we want to get out of the way and let that person continue doing what they're doing, right? So, but yeah, we're happy to have that. So mystorybuilders.com/story, and just schedule time and let's chat about it.
That'll be awesome. I'll make sure I get that. I'll put that in the show notes, the description, so everyone can find you when they're looking for you. How long does a typical person work with you? Is it probably depends on the complexity of the story, or the person, like 3 to 6 months, a year? What's kind of a
Yeah.
typical time frame?
Yeah, typically if someone comes to us, they have a manuscript done. We just need to work on the editing and bringing it to life. That's like a 4 to 5 month process. If we're writing it with them, that's more like a 8 or 9 month process in most cases. Again, depends on people's schedules. If we start having a conversation in, September, October, then we're probably going to be wrapped up heading into the summer the following year, and actually have a book that's up and out and ready for the world to read.
Good information, Bill. Bill, it's been absolutely awesome speaking with you about story
Likewise.
builders and everything you've done in your past, from being, a pastor to creating a school to writing to your current endeavor. So it's been awesome having you on Time We Discuss.
Well, pleasure to be here. Pleasure's all mine. I appreciate the questions and appreciate what you're doing as you're exploring these things so people can learn what the options are and put their talents to work.